And that's more important than what I was bringing up about not abiding by election results, not respecting what always made this country great, the peaceful transference of power.
I don't disagree with you on that. You're not going to get me to say it was a great thing the way Trump behaved.
I don't have to get you to agree or disagree. You're obviously someone who looks at an elephant and a mouse and cannot tell which one is bigger.
In a tense debate, comedian and political commentator Bill Maher shut down the MAGA cultish talking points of right-wing commentator Megyn Kelly, who hid behind Hillary Clinton whataboutism and the delusion that the Hunter Biden laptop story is like the most important in political history. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe and alert bell before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at in this video. This conversation, I think, was supposed to be much less tense than what it ended up becoming, because as Megyn Kelly notes in this first clip, she thinks that she and Bill Maher have quite a bit in common, and indeed they do with respect to their disdain for all things woke, which is something that annoys me about Bill Maher, his hyperfixation on these niche culture war issues, when the political reality is that the right and the Republican Party are just objectively greater threats. But to my satisfaction, for the most part, that fundamental difference between these two pretty quickly revealed itself, and the conversation somewhat spiraled out of control. So we're going to play these clips and unpack them together.
But there's enough commonality to make us shake our heads yes when the other one speaks a lot.
So you're going to vote for Trump?
I am going to vote for Trump, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even understand that. And I understand that Biden is deeply flawed, but he does believe in our way of life. And, you know, I mean, I was the one who was saying from the very beginning, when everyone was laughing at me, that Donald Trump will never give up power. And he didn't. He still hasn't conceded the last election. I don't know what could possibly be more fundamental to you or anyone than you have to concede elections. And he hasn't conceded the last one. He's plainly not going to concede this one. He now has all of his sycophants around him parroting his party line, which is when they ask them, will you abide by the election results? Yes, if it's a free and fair election, which is another way of saying if we win. You really think this is a place this country should be?
Great point. And again, we're going to play some of her response there because we have several clips to look at. But again, the fundamental difference between them pretty quickly revealed itself. And yes, Bill Maher was one of the few from the very beginning in Trump's presidency to say, this guy is not the sort of person to give up power. And some people say, well, he did, he finally left. But January 6th and the overall attempt to steal the election from President Biden is indeed a rejection of the peaceful transfer of power. There was violence from the insurrectionist mob at the Capitol, and it was fomented by Donald Trump. He did indeed shatter President Washington's precedent of the peaceful transfer of power, which is individually, by far, the most important civic tradition that we have. So after laying that out, this is what Megyn Kelly has to say in response.
I'm not going to defend the election denialism. I'm not one of those people who believes that.
But what's more important? What kind of country do we have?
How about my daughter not going into a locker room and seeing a man's penis?
That's important too, and
How about young men on college campuses getting due process when they get accused falsely of rape?
Well, I think that's a false equivalency. I think these things are.
What do you mean?
I think these things are important, but you can handle these things through the normal due process of our system. But if we lose the system itself, come on.
But we didn't.
We didn't so far.
He tried it. It failed.
Right. And now he's had 4 years to put in place people who will make it work again. I don't know if there'll be a John Ratzenberger in Georgia, a noble Republican who stood up to him. He thought last time that he could count on someone being just a Republican to do his bidding. And what he found out was that there are a lot of decent people who are Republicans, which is something I'm trying to tell the Democrats all the time.
So again, this is where a bit of Bill Maher's indulgence for anti-woke talking points gets on my nerves. But I'm proud of him for saying, listen, even if you disagree on these issues, these are things that you litigate through the typical political process under the constitutional framework. But Donald Trump is a threat directly to the constitutional framework, which you can't have if you don't have a peaceful transfer of power and a commitment to accepting the results of a free and fair election, right? You can't have typical political discourse and litigation and legislation. If those things are compromised, that's a great point. Now, I'll point out too that even if I take Megyn Kelly's issues at face value, she didn't actually tie it directly with a vote for Trump versus a vote for President Biden. What does President Biden have to do with college campuses? She has never made that direct connection. Because, of course, President Biden has no role to play with respect to how college campuses in college governments, litigate their issue with the student body, and even on trans issues. President Biden is obviously very inclusive. He's much more protective of trans rights than Donald Trump. But what has Joe Biden done in terms of legislating, situations or bills where Megyn Kelly feels that her daughter would be exposed to a trans person in a bathroom? Again, she fails to actually make the case here, setting aside the fact that these are hyper niche issues. But this is again that the debate continues. I'll also point out too that before I play this next clip, that one thing that frustrates me about what Megyn Kelly said there at the end, which is this idea that, well, Trump failed. Sure, he tried to overthrow a free and fair election. He tried to litigate his way into a second term, unelected. He did all of these nefarious things. He fed an insurrection, but he failed. This is the same excuse that Ben Shapiro and Bill Barr and other people who have obvious issues with Donald Trump say to tell themselves and their audience that it's okay to still vote for Trump because the guardrails held. And again, let's use that metaphor. Guardrails like the guardrails on a bridge or the guardrails on a highway. If somebody plows into the guardrails, either in a drunken stupor or deliberately you toss them a fresh set of keys after their first failed attempt, and say, hey, take another crack at it. No, of course not. You extract them from the guardrails. You make sure they can't run into the guardrails again. And then you reinforce the guardrails. And depending on how, when, and why they crashed into the guardrails, you may even revoke their license and arrest them. But instead, what Megyn Kelly and Ben Shapiro want you to do is don't reinforce the guardrails, just trust that because they held the first time they will hold under any all future attempts to plow through them the next time. And by the way, Megyn Kelly's an attorney. This idea that an attempt at something nefarious, which in and of itself is nefarious, means that you should let it go. How would Megyn Kelly feel if someone tried to use that logic to justify attempted murder? What's wrong with attempted murder? They didn't actually murder anybody, absolutely stupid stuff from somebody so smart, but more from Bill Maher and Megyn Kelly.
I agree with you that the majority of the Republican Party doesn't believe that. But I do think there's a difference between it was stolen, the nonsense with Dominion voting machines and all that, versus it wasn't fair. And
what wasn't fair? The
election. Don't get me started. What wasn't fair?
Okay. Well, the
How
election.
about the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story? Just for one.
Oh, for f***'s sake, really? Oh, then we're not as alike as you think. That's
okay.
That's a stupid non-story. I mean, yes.
Says who? There are polls that show some 10 to 12% of the electorate says they would have changed their mind had they seen it, had they known about it.
It wasn't right. It wasn't right to suppress it, but nobody gives a f*** about Hunter Biden's dick.
Say nobody. You're talking about yourself. I'm telling you, there are data to show people did care. They said they would have changed their vote.
Nobody who was going to vote for Trump anyway, or Biden anyway. I mean,
it wasn't about Hunter Biden's man parts. It was about the scandal of his corruption and his dad's corruption. Bill, I used to think that Hunter Biden was a hot mess and Joe Biden was embarrassed by him but had to deal. Now I really think he was doing Joe Biden's bidding. Joe Biden is the bad guy who sent his drug-addled son out there to collect money. That's what the laptop shows.
And that's more important than what I was bringing up about not abiding by election results, not respecting what always made this country great, the peaceful transference of power.
I don't disagree with you on that. You're not going to get me to say it was a great thing the way Trump behaved.
I don't have to get you to agree or disagree. You're obviously someone who looks at an elephant and a mouse and cannot tell which one is bigger.
Proud of Bill Maher again for that, even though I would have defended some of these things or countered these things a bit more vigorously in the moment. But again, it's important to establish the fact that Megyn Kelly is creating a false equivalence. Even if we take everything she says for value, which obviously we shouldn't because she's lying about a bunch of these things. So a couple of things we're going to get to the poll, right? She says that there's polling their data out there indicating that the election would have flipped the opposite direction had more people known about the Hunter Biden laptop. I submit to you that Megyn Kelly should learn more about the Hunter Biden laptop because House Republicans have been investigating President Biden and whatever sorted connection he may or may not have had to Hunter Biden's sorted, potentially business dealings, right? And they have failed spectacularly to produce anything approaching compelling evidence of an impeachable offense. Why is that? If what she said is true, which is that Hunter Biden was out there corruptly doing Joe Biden's bidding, that would probably lend itself well to an impeachable offense, at least potentially, would be certainly better than what they have now. And yet, Republican after Republican after Republican after Republican have admitted Fox News host after Fox News host after Fox News host after Fox News host have admitted that the Republicans have failed to produce compelling evidence of the very claims that she's making here. So, as a matter of fact, witnesses like Devon Archer, who worked very closely with Hunter Biden, have said Joe Biden had nothing to do with Hunter Biden's business ventures. He didn't get him the job. He wasn't part of any business transaction. There's no direct evidence. Tie these two. Even the idea that, well, Donald Trump really isn't a strong candidate on substance. Let me know what you think in the comments.